you're going to pull out those prints that you made at the beginning that hopefully you kept around, because that's the whole point. You're going to thumb through them and you're going to say, oh, this paper, this Moen Kobe Kozo, it's subtle, it's a really velvet surface, it almost looks like you could touch it. I did this great series of abstract landscapes that would look amazing on this paper. I'm going to try that. And then, maybe there's a paper that you've used a lot, like we'll say the exhibition luster, and you're like, I love that, but it's traditional. It doesn't get me fired up anymore. So I'm going to set that one off to the side. I'm going to add the Kozo, and I'm going to go print this set images, and I'm super fired up about it. So just don't feel like you have to be an expert of everything, and don't be afraid to experiment, for sure.
Great. Yeah. So moving on to maybe like the hardware side, the computer side, talk more about maybe color profiles and monitor calibration.
Yeah. So the goal of this whole thing is consistency. So when you snap a photo in your digital camera, or when you scan a negative, those colors get converted to numbers, right? Color in digital it's math. It's plottable on a three-dimensional graph. And that three-dimensional graph is what we call gamut. So the gamut is the total number of available colors, possible colors. What we capture is a small portion of that, but your gamut is your overall. And what you want to do is, when you adjust that raw file and you look at it on your screen and then you print it, you want those numbers to always stay consistent. So first off, profile your monitor. Now, why do you do that? Because the computer video card has no idea what's on your screen. You could be looking at a black and white image on your screen. Like, let's say your screen has gone black and white. The computer doesn't know that. It's sending out a full color video signal. So the monitor calibrator sits on your screen and it reads 1 or 2 or 400 color patches, and it compares those color patches to the values they should be. And it says, oh, this green is a little too yellow, or this red is a little too magenta. And at the end of that process, it makes a color profile, which is just a little adaptation table. So the computer sends out the image, it goes through the color profile, and there on your screen, it's exactly how it should look. And making a print profile is the same process. We print a couple thousand color patches. They get read in by a spectrophotometer. They go through the profile creation process. And at the end of that, we have our output profile. And so that makes sure that the colors that are on your screen are matched as closely as possible on paper. Now, Adobe RGB monitor, a 10-bit monitor, can display more colors usually than we can get on our papers, which is fine. The process of going from the computer to the printer through the color profile does something called rendering intent. And what rendering intent does is it changes those out of gamut colors, those colors we can't print one-to-one, and adjusts them so they look natural on the page, but they're not exactly what they were on the screen. And so if everything's working right, even though some of the colors in your print have been changed intentionally, it will still look extremely close to the monitor, because our eyes are looking at that comparison about how all those colors relate to each other. So important step number 1, calibrate your monitor. Important step number 2, make sure you're printing with a color profile for your paper, and then make sure that when we publish a color profile, we match a media setting to every paper. So when you download that profile, keep an eye on what media setting to use. And if you have a profiled monitor and you're using the correct printer profile, the last step is to have a good light source to evaluate that, because prints are viewed from reflected light. And so if you have, say, a fluorescent light and a standard, desk lamp, the prints are going to look completely different, because that fluorescent light is green in color. It has some of the visible spectrum available, but not all of it. So colors might simply disappear in a print if you're looking at it under a poor light source. The sun is always a great light source, but especially here in the Northwest in January, its moments are fleeting, and the last thing you want to do is take your print out when it's raining to get a nice looking outdoor light at it. So the last step to that process is having a desk lamp or an overhead light with a really good LED bulb, or as long as you remember that it's going to be a little warm tone, a standard incandescent bulb is going to be full spectrum. It's just going to be a little more yellow than a
Mhm.
normal light source. So those are the most important things, and those help to ensure that whatever you're seeing, you can trust your eyes and you can base your decisions on that.
Do you also, with lighting, like recommend mimicking kind of the light that it will be displayed in? Like maybe it'll be in a dark part of your house. Like, would you recommend something like that?
That's ideal, but that's sort of the 200 level education of lighting. If you're going to display a print in a dark part of your house, keep in mind that prints are not lit, right? They don't illuminate like a monitor does. So if you're going to put a print in a dark place, you're going to have to light it in some way, because it doesn't matter how much you crank the exposure on that, the print's still going to look dark just because there's not enough light to reflect. At the other end of that, if you're doing a high-end gallery show, people will go in, and especially if they're working with a custom printer, that printer may go in and measure the light source in the gallery, make a specific profile for those lights in the gallery, print the show images, and when someone comes in and buys an image, they're not actually taking that image off the wall. They're going to get a print that's made to a standard um, light source in the profile, so that it looks good in their environment. Because if we sold them the custom one off the gallery wall, it's not going to look quite the same when they get it home. But that's the real,
Hmm.
that's the real high end um, color management, where it's worth the time and investment to do that because of the price you're able to sell the prints for, or whatever else. But no, the biggest thing is just start with the basics, and then as your needs increase, you can reassess your workflow and your tools. It's just like
Hmm.
when you're starting out in photography, you're not going to go out and buy a high-end mirrorless and $15,000 worth of f2.8 lenses and a couple of studio lights and everything else, right? You're going to start with a simple camera and a simple lens, and you're going to learn. If you're new to printing, you're back to that basic point. Don't
Hmm.
go out and buy the Ferrari when you just got your driver's license.
Um, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. Would you say for the beginners, like it's an absolute must to have all those calibration tools?
Well, I
Just
think
to.
the best thing is, again, this gets us back to who you know. If you're in a camera club and you're just kind of getting started, bring in your laptop and have someone who has a calibrator bring that in, and have them calibrate it for you, and they can kind of teach you the ins and outs of that. If you have a couple of friends and one of you has one, maybe you figure out what the rental cost for that is. Is it a couple of sheets of paper? Is it a print? Is it a six pack of beer? So you can borrow that for the weekend and calibrate your monitor. And it's all about fostering that. But a good monitor calibrator is pretty inexpensive. $175 for most people, and that thing will last you many years. So that's the most important investment, I would say. Get the monitor calibrator, get the printer, and away you go.
Yeah, and
Let's
make sure
say
you load in those profiles, right?
Yes, of
yeah.
course, but those are free, so that's good.
Oh, that's good. Nice.
Makes it a little easier. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So let's say you get the monitor calibrator. Now, how often would you calibrate your displays?
So the average place to start is do it once a month. So do it, wait a month, do it again, and then at the end you can do a before and after comparison. And if you do the before and after comparison and nothing changes, well, then you know that in your environment that's stable for a month. So then wait 2 months and calibrate it and do your before and after, and you'll find out at some point in there it'll change visibly, and then that that's your interval. In the old days with analog CRT monitors, design houses would calibrate every morning before they started work, because things could literally change overnight, and you had to make sure that your color was consistent day to day. But thankfully that's only in high end, and that's become much less with these really stable LED displays that we have, and everything else like that. So start with once a month and then figure out what your necessary interval is from there.